Okay, so today we are talking about JFK and his presidency and some of the impacts he has early in his leadership for our country and then his tragic death. So let's get started. All right, here we go. So there we see various pictures, just the life of JFK. He's kind of an American legacy and hero, and we'll see there's a lot of different perspectives, especially in his passing, different views about his leadership and what he did for the country. So first off, you got to get elected if you're going to be president. And in 1960, there was a close race between himself and a guy named Richard Nixon, which he'll become president a little bit later. And JFK really is kind of runs on this idea of being wealthy and handsome. He's very charismatic. We'll watch some video clips here. And just the way he kind of postures himself. He's really young. He'll be the youngest president elected since Theodore Roosevelt. So he is a part of a new generation, and it will be the only Roman Catholic ever to be elected to the White House. And really the difference was the change in technology, that Richard Nixon was not prepared for a presidential race in which TV would be such an important tool, where JFK comes across looking better, where Richard Nixon maybe had a better resume of sorts, where he had been vice president for 8 years and been governor before that, so he had a lot of experience in kind of leading, and he was a really strong anti-communist, where some people saw JFK as a little bit weaker on the subject. And if you remember, we're in the heat of the Cold War. You really don't want to be seen as weak on communism. So here is the election map, and we can see it is all checkered, right? All across here are red states, which would be Kennedy, and blue states here would be Nixon, and then another guy named Byrd ran, but he didn't really get much other than the Deep South. So really, the electoral vote is really close. If you can see, it's within a couple percentages, but more importantly, the popular vote was neck and neck. If you see 34 million, it is really, really close. Some people get a little, there's a debate going on how much manipulation of the polls was going on, but in the end, people generally see that JFK won the. All right, so I'm back, and so Kennedy gets elected in 1960. Is seen as a pretty big change, a movement away from some pretty conservative and older presidents with a lot of experience, and now on to somebody that is brand new. And so his famous, inaugural speech, part of it at least. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man. So, a really powerful message. He brings in just this enormous amount of energy, and there's a lot of enthusiasm surrounding his presidency. And not only his presidency, but his family. So we can see that JFK, really, his family is seen as really this idyllic family. They're young, they're pretty good looking, they play games, and they're really stylish. So we can see a little man in the White House checking out Lincoln's desk, but the family goes on vacation. They're seen as kind of the modern family, and really this catchphrase kind of gets thrown out here of the Camelot years, kind of referencing King Arthur and this Knights of the Round Table that he restores and brings back prestige to the presidency, or at least energy and vibrance that wasn't there before. And he brings along some of the young and smart and talented people with him that he had kind of grown up in this new generation that had fought in World War II, or at least been involved in that, and that really want to push the country forward. So guys like McGeorge Bundy, isn't that a heck of a name? Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, we'll talk more about him, that's him down there. Dean Rusk, Secretary of State, and his own brother, Robert Kennedy. All right, and we're going to see that his brother, Bobby Kennedy, how he was also known, really had no previous law experience, and he was going to be the head attorney of the country, who was going to be in charge of enforcing the laws, basically, in the FBI. And we're going to see there's some problems with that a little bit later on. Not everybody was a huge fan, and later he'll run for president as well. And JFK has a new idea about how the military should be used. Rather than this kind of overwhelming force that Eisenhower wanted to use, saying that if you strike us, we'll strike you and we'll destroy the world together, JFK wants a flexible response. So he increases spending and for conventional forces, such as troops and ships and artillery, so that the United States military can kind of have a lot of flexibility in how it responds to Cold War crisis around the world. In particular, he starts the Special Forces, so the Green Berets and later the Navy SEALs, the Army Rangers that already kind of existed by that point, and he triples the overall capacity of the United States for nuclear action. So really up in the ante, that America is changing the way it's going to do that. And really the goal was the United States was going to try to limit the wars around the world by maintaining this balance with the Soviets. So if they don't mess with us, we won't mess with them, and everybody else will play along. And the crisis in the Cold War develops in Cuba. So in 1959, Fidel Castro comes to power. He overthrows this dictatorship that was friendly with the United States and puts on mass trials and executes people, which is not really good because America, if you remember, really liked the idea of the Monroe Doctrine, that crazy stuff is not going to happen in our neighborhood, that you can't just do whatever you want in the Western Hemisphere, that the United States is going to have something to say about it. The United States denounces Cuba, obviously, for doing these things. And lots of Cubans don't want to be in Cuba anymore. They don't want to be in a communist country. They like the way it was. The rich, the educated, those with savings or significant economic holding, and so they leave. So now South Florida has a pretty active Cuban population even to this day. And Castro, to prop up his communist revolution, seizes all the United States businesses. The United States had invested in Cuba for a really long time, since the War of the Spanish-American War, excuse me, and most importantly with sugar, right? America loves sugar then and now, so that we say no more sugar, we're not buying anything more from you. In fact, you can't buy anything from Cuba even still today. The Obama administration is changing that a little bit, but we'll see where it goes. And so the United States cuts off trade with Cuba, so the Cubans go to the Soviets and say, hey, we have sugar, we want to sell you, let's make a deal. It gets worse because just before Kennedy gets in office, Ike, or President Eisenhower, orders the CIA to train these guys to go back to Cuba and try to invade their homeland and take it back from Castro and these communists. And JFK, once he gets in office, agrees with this plan. And the plan would be the day before the invasion, the United States would use its Air Force to destroy Castro's Air Force, and the exiles would land, kind of like a D-Day situation, and the Cuban people would rise up because they obviously don't want Castro, they want democracy, was the assumption. However, it failed. It was a big fail. JFK is ultimately, I guess, responsible and is seen as not providing enough resources for this operation, and the exiles land without a whole lot of support, and they're rounded up, and obviously they're taken care of, and JFK later on says, well, if we can't do it by force this way, let's do it in a sneaky way. And so Operation Mongoose down here, the government agents try to work to disrupt Cuba's trade, so they're going to try to bankrupt the nation as well as they're going to try to assassinate Fidel Castro. They've tried numerous times in the United States in its history and has never been successful. So Fidel Castro must have more than 9 lives, including working with the mob. So we're going to see that might come back in the future. So the next thing that happens is the Cuban Missile Crisis. You might remember this from last year. So in an attempt to counter this failed American invasion of the island, the Soviets say, hey, let's put some atomic weapons on your island. That'll ensure your safety. So Castro and this guy Khrushchev, the leader of the Soviet Union, come up with this plan, and they're going to install these bombs as well as military aid. So we're going to see Cuba, especially the northern portion of the island, or the part closest to America, is going to be filled with atomic weapons. And if you remember, once again, the Monroe Doctrine, this is a no-no, that America does not want bad things in its backyard, especially atomic weapons that can wipe out American cities. So let's go to the map. And we can see large portions of the United States would be threatened by the existence of these atomic weapons in Cuba. And so there's a big debate among JFK and all his new advisors, who are pretty young and inexperienced, and this is a pretty serious situation. We find out by spying on them. We throw some, fly some planes over there and get pictures of these bombs being assembled. And so what JFK decides is not a direct confrontation, which a lot of his advisors did suggest he should do, but instead they quarantine the island. So a blockade is seen as a military action, but a quarantine apparently is something different, although they're exactly the same. So these ships with more weapons are heading to Cuba, and the United States says, no, we're not going to allow you to do that. And so the blockade is set up on October 20th and in '62, and it actually works because these ships turn around. They go back. 2 of them make it in, but that's kind of a minor story. So the United States is seen as really at least winning this. So let's talk about some of the specifics. Like I said, a U-2 flight showed that there were 65 sites with these weapons that could strike the United States in 3 minutes. So it doesn't matter what kind of drill or building you're in 3 minutes, an atomic bomb gives you no options. So JFK orders a quarantine, like I said, rather than a blockade. It's all words make the difference. And he went to TV. This is an interesting choice that JFK would, rather than going to the Soviets quietly, decides to bring it out into the public, saying that the Soviets are doing this, this is the information and the proof we have, and this is what we're going to do about it. Obviously, this puts everybody on edge, and so we get really close to atomic war, which no one would win because we'd all die. And almost for a week, 13 days in fact, the world was on the brink of atomic war. And it all ended. It kind of cooled off eventually as the Soviets and the Americans started to communicate, and they made a deal that the United States would not attack Cuba, and they'd remove their missiles from Turkey, but that was a secret. And instead, Khrushchev was going to publicly remove his missiles from Cuba. And so this is seen as a win, I guess, for Kennedy, but some people, including myself, would be pretty critical of his getting that far into that situation. Getting close to the destruction of the world is maybe not the best leadership ever. Anyway, so a question I'd be interested in you thinking about is, should he have used TV as the medium to work out this situation? And last but not least, they decide, okay, we're going to have a direct hotline. So this is the phone in which the Soviet Union and the United States could talk if there were ever problems, and they limit what nuclear weapons can be tested. So they say not in the ocean, not in the atmosphere, not in outer space, and a bunch of other nations sign up and agree that that's a good idea. And so Khrushchev said that, like I said, that's a repeat. So skip that. And we're going to pause here quickly and highlight that JFK was assassinated in 1963. I'm going to put that in a separate episode. However, that is optional. We'll talk about it in class. So if you want to learn a little bit more detail, I'll be recording one. But if you just want to go along with class, that'd be okay too. All right, thanks guys. Have a good day.